Have you ever found yourself frozen in a crowded room, silently timing someone else's laughter, only to realize those seconds are ticking down the end of everything you thought was real? Imagine standing inches away, invisible in plain sight, as a single giggle unravels the threads of trust, leading to a chain of discoveries so twisted, it'll make you question every innocent moment in your own life. Hang on tight through this gripping saga of subtle betrayal, hidden motives, and a quiet revenge that flips the script entirely, because by the time we reach the shocking finale, you'll understand why some silences scream louder than words, and how one man's awakening turns pain into unbreakable power. She let out a laugh that stretched on for exactly 13 seconds. I counted every single one of them, whispering those Mississippis under my breath, from 1 all the way to 13 without missing a beat. It was one of those overly exuberant bursts, the type where her head tipped back a touch too dramatically, and her hand lightly grazed his shoulder as if they were sharing some private joke, as if this kind of easy familiarity had happened between them more times than I cared to imagine. And there I was, positioned just 3 feet away, close enough to feel every ripple of exclusion. And believe me, as the layers peel back, secrets exposed, alliances formed, and justice delivered in the most unexpected ways, you won't want to miss a single heartbeat-pounding detail, revealing that true strength isn't in the confrontation. It's in the masterful comeback that leaves everyone else scrambling. I'd only just passed her a fresh glass of wine moments before, and she accepted it without so much as a sideways glance in my direction, extending her arm backward like I was nothing more than a hired server at an event she'd rather forget she'd extended an invitation to. As for the guy towering beside her, tall frame, sleeves neatly rolled up to the cuffs, a flashy watch that practically shouted about his aggressive stock market plays, he wasn't even delivering anything remotely hilarious. His line was some bland remark on marketing metrics, yet she erupted in laughter as though he'd single-handedly redefined what comedy could be. I hadn't sparked that kind of genuine, unrestrained joy in her for months on end, perhaps even longer if I forced myself to be brutally honest. Still, I lingered there in that space, though I couldn't quite pinpoint why, maybe holding out hope that she'd draw me into the circle, wrap an arm around me, and introduce me proudly with those words she once used so effortlessly, "This is my husband." But that didn't happen. Instead, she inched even nearer to him, her eyes lighting up with that same vibrant sparkle I'd seen directed at me in the early days, back when I was more than just the comfortable, overlooked hum of everyday life. The atmosphere in the room felt thick and oppressive, warmed by the buzz of affluent conversations and laced with the scent of expensive perfumes mingled with superficial charisma. Everyone around flashed smiles that stretched a bit too wide, too rehearsed. I stood out awkwardly in my simple khakis, like an unintended error in the polished scene. In one final attempt to connect, I reached out softly, tapping her elbow with care, and started to say, "Hey, I'm heading out too," but she cut me off without even pivoting her head, hissing those 2 sharp words through clenched teeth. "Not now." They landed flat and decisive, leaving no room for negotiation. I bobbed my head like a fool, plastered on a phony grin, and made my exit, brushing past a man droning on about the impeccable lighting and a woman whose forced chuckle rang hollow at some non-existent punchline. I resisted the urge to glance over my shoulder until I was safely settled in the car, engine humming softly. There, I sat enveloped in utter quiet, no radio tunes to fill the void, just the rhythm of my own breath syncing with the distant pulse of the city carrying on as cities always do. Tears didn't come, though the thought crossed my mind more than once. Then, precisely at 11:42 p.m., my phone vibrated with a notification. Her name flashed across the screen, followed by a solitary message containing just one word, "Come." In that split second, my mind raced to the absurd. Did he even realize she'd sent that to me? When that cryptic "come" appeared, I held back from firing off an immediate response. Instead, I fixated on the word, scrutinizing it as if it held the key to some age-old puzzle that might finally ease the throbbing ache in my chest. What exactly did she intend? Come back to the gathering? Come reclaim my role as her unseen support system? Come play the part of the compliant spouse who overlooks her blatant flirtation with a complete stranger while I fade into the scenery like forgotten furniture? I skipped the questions, avoided typing anything in return. What I did instead was pull up the location-sharing app she'd insisted I install the previous year, after her sudden wave of anxiety about neighborhood safety. Just in case anything ever goes wrong with me, she'd explained back then. What a twisted irony that turned out to be. Her signal pinpointed her still at the event venue. I observed the little icon shift gradually, as if she were strolling leisurely down a corridor or perhaps heading toward the bar for another round. It could have been toward him, or maybe a quick detour to the restroom, or possibly leading nowhere at all. I had no solid clue. Yet I found myself glued to the screen, unable to tear away. 20 long minutes ticked by with that glowing dot holding steady, unblinking, almost taunting me to keep vigil. My imagination spiraled into overdrive, conjuring scenarios like her accidentally messaging the wrong contact, or worse, deliberately directing "come at him." Even more gut-wrenching was the notion that she'd crafted it specifically for me, fully aware I'd spot it and slink back, desperate and defeated. It felt less like a warm beckon and more like a stern order, a subtle tug on an invisible chain she'd wrapped around me long ago. I refused to return. Rather than retreating, I hit the road, not toward our home, not to any predetermined spot. I simply chased the glow of urban lights, veering onto side streets at whim, as if I could accelerate away from the heavy weight pressing on my heart. Somehow, my aimless path led me to park by the lake, the very same secluded area we'd frequented when we first relocated here. In those early times, we'd perch on the car's hood, splitting greasy fries, and spin tales of wild ambitions, the sort you'd never share with family for fear of their skeptical laughter. Now it was solely me, gripping the wheel with chilled fingers, my phone illuminating the dim interior with that lone, unanswered message. And then, without warning, the dot on the map stirred to life. At first glance, I dismissed it as a technical hiccup, but it persisted in its motion, gliding down the avenue, crossing over to a location that struck a chord of recognition. A hotel, not one of those opulent high-rises with panoramic views, but a standard corporate extended stay kind, complete with elevators carrying faint whiffs of artificial lemon and dashed aspirations. Her position halted firmly on the 12th floor. I glared at the display, demanding it yield some rationale for this madness. No additional texts followed, no clarifying call, nothing beyond that initial abrupt directive. In the end, I mustered a reply, not laced with fury or interrogations, but a straightforward query: alone or not? And there I remained, pulse racing wildly, acutely aware that her forthcoming response could either shatter me completely or unleash a storm of something far more ominous and unforgiving. 7 agonizing minutes dragged on before her answer materialized. 7 minutes crammed with every conceivable horror flashing through my thoughts, each more harrowing than the previous. I envisioned her loitering in that bland hotel corridor, poised outside a room door, device clutched in her palm, his scent still clinging to her. Perhaps she was weighing whether to spin a falsehood. Maybe she was locking eyes with him as her fingers danced across the keys. Or the most searing image of all, her sharing a chuckle with him over my message, displaying the screen and quipping, "See how worked up he gets?" When the notification finally chimed, it delivered a single word: alone. Nothing more. No elaboration, no remorse, no shred of affection. I didn't buy it for a second. Whether I even desired to trust it was debatable, but I craved the unfiltered facts, and a digital exchange no longer sufficed. So I set off toward the hotel. It wasn't a great distance, roughly 15 minutes amid the sparse late-night traffic, but each mile stretched eternally. Red lights mocked me like deliberate delays. Every curve amplified the knot of apprehension twisting inside. I coached myself en route that this was purely for a conversation, that I wouldn't raise my voice, plead desperately, or crumble emotionally. I convinced myself I merely needed to meet her gaze and discern what sort of person could inflict such quiet devastation on someone who'd cherished her steadfastly for years. I pulled into a spot across the road and peered upward at the towering structure, zeroing in on the 12th floor. One window glowed with light, drawing my focus. In my mind's eye, she lounged on the bed's edge, composed as ever, as if the evening's chaos were my invention alone. As if my abrupt departure had somehow spoiled her fun, placing the onus on me to make amends. The lobby greeted me with its chilly, impersonal vibe. A young clerk behind the desk offered a cursory nod, barely acknowledging my existence. I ascended in the elevator alone, fixated on my distorted reflection in the gleaming doors. My shirt bore unsightly creases. My complexion appeared ghostly under the harsh fluorescence. I resembled less a resolute man and more a faded echo of one. Upon arriving at her floor, doubt nearly turned me back. My finger lingered over the phone screen, tempted to send another probe. Are you truly by yourself? But then my attention snagged on it. The door at the hallway's far end, left slightly ajar, a slim gap inviting curiosity. I advanced toward it with deliberate slowness, my breaths echoing thunderously in the confined space. With every footfall, the weight intensified. I skipped the knock, omitted any call of her name. Instead, I nudged the door wider open. The sight that met me chilled me to the core. There she sat on the bed, shoes discarded, still clad in the elegant dress from the soiree. Her high heels lay haphazardly nearby. Mascara streaks marred her face, evidence of vigorous eye-rubbing. She lifted her head as I stepped in, but shock was absent from her expression. No, she regarded me as if I'd arrived behind schedule, as though my presence was anticipated all along. Yet beneath that, something lurked in her gaze, a veiled caution, a hidden edge. And that's precisely when it registered. The subtle click reminiscent of a closet latch easing into place behind me. I went rigid, every sense on high alert. You know that eerie sensation when the atmosphere thickens abruptly, as if the very space harbors secrets you're not privy to? That's what enveloped me the instant that faint, nearly inaudible click pierced the quiet. It lacked volume or flair. It was understated, deliberately so, as if orchestrated to evade detection. And Junie, she remained unflinching. She offered no inquiry about my sudden appearance, no invitation to join her or expression of regret. She simply held my stare, her fingers interlaced tightly in her lap, as if containing a storm or steeling herself for an impending eruption. I held my tongue, my focus shifting beyond her to the room's distant corner, where the closet door hung ever so slightly askew from its proper alignment. No shadows revealed themselves from within, but an instinctive unease clawed at me, a nauseating dread creeping upward. Then came another noise, not a latch this time but a distinct exhale. One deliberate breath, piercing the hush too prominently, yet lacking the assurance of openness. It suggested someone releasing pent-up air after a prolonged hold, someone unprepared for my bold intrusion. I shifted my attention back to Junie, and in that moment, I detected it etched across her features. Not outright terror, not overt shame, but a calculated poise, as if she were dissecting my every micro-expression, anticipating whether I'd veer into recklessness, whether I'd dare to swing open that door. In a hushed tone, she uttered a single word, "Don't." Nothing more, not an offer to clarify, not a plea of misunderstanding, not even a hint of reassurance. Just that stark command, as if I were a naive youngster reaching for a dangerous object, incapable of bearing the revelation lurking beyond. But retreat wasn't an option this time, not after the humiliation at the party, not following her terse message, not in the wake of the gaze she'd bestowed on that stranger, not after those endless 13 seconds of her unrestrained mirth. So I pressed onward, each stride reversing the sting of past betrayals, unraveling the threads of our shared history with every inch toward that unassuming hotel closet. Junie stayed rooted in place, issuing no cry, making no move to intervene. Her inaction spoke volumes, solidifying my resolve. I grasped the handle, my palm quivering as it closed around the metal. It radiated unexpected warmth, not from ambient air, but from recent contact, from fingers that had gripped it mere moments before. Someone concealed within, drawing shallow breaths, attuned to every sound. I eased the door open with measured caution. What awaited inside defied my grim expectations. It wasn't him lurking there, no disheveled figure, no discarded shoes or coat, no frantic gasps from the shadows. Far more unsettling, perched neatly on the inner shelf was her phone, not merely active but actively capturing footage. The front-facing camera aimed outward, a crimson timer ticking upward in the display's corner, marking a full hour and 16 minutes of recording. My own stunned reflection stared back from the screen, eyes wide with disbelief, body trembling subtly. I extended my arm inside, retrieving the device with unsteady fingers. Pivoting back toward her, still poised motionless on the bed, her face an enigma, my voice faltered as I demanded, "What in the world is this?" She blinked with deliberate slowness. Then, at long last, she broke the silence with a composure that struck me as unervingly serene, far too steady for the chaos unfolding between us. "I needed to capture exactly how this evening played out," she explained, "just in case it ever resurfaced down the line." Resurfaced later. Those words hung in the air like a veiled threat. My tone escalated sharply now, a rush of heat climbing up my neck as frustration boiled over. "What on earth are you getting at? You've been secretly recording me? Stashing your phone away in the closet like some kind of setup?" Her response came without a moment's hesitation. She rose from the bed with deliberate grace, her hands gliding down to straighten the wrinkles in her dress as if readying herself for an entrance onto a grand stage. She approached me not with any trace of apprehension or remorse, but with this unsettling, almost otherworldly patience that sent chills racing across my skin. And then she delivered the line that etched itself permanently into my memory, echoing even today. "Because if I hadn't done this, you'd spin the whole thing your way." I let out a laugh right then, but it emerged harsh and unsteady, the sort that teeters on the edge of a full-blown outburst, raw and laced with disbelief. "Spin what exactly? That I showed up here because you specifically summoned me? That I trailed you to this hotel after you spent the entire evening brushing me off, making me feel utterly invisible and degraded in a crowd of total strangers?" She regarded me with an expression that suggested I was merely tiresome, a minor inconvenience. "You're always so paranoid, Albert. You've been that way forever, twisting every little thing into something it's not. That's precisely why I had to gather proof." "Proof of what?" I demanded, my volume rising uncontrollably. "That I entered a room and dared to open a door? That I held it together when every fiber of my being screamed otherwise?" She released a weary sigh, as if my questions were exhausting her patience. "You were bound to hurl accusations regardless. So, I figured it was smarter to catch you in the act on video." That's the precise instant when the full weight of it crashed down on me. This had long ceased to revolve around affection or simple slip-ups, or even the sting of disloyalty. No, this was calculated maneuvering, a bid for dominance. It had been simmering beneath the surface for ages. I'd simply been too blinded to notice until this very confrontation. I'd convinced myself I was fading into obscurity in her life, a mere shadow. But the truth cut deeper. I'd been reduced to a pawn in a narrative she'd been meticulously reshaping all along. The urge surged through me to hurl the phone across the room, to raise my voice until it shattered the silence, to smash the nearby mirror, anything to force her to confront the devastation she was inflicting. Yet I held back. Instead, I chose a path that felt even more devastating in its finality. I gripped the phone tightly, turned on my heel, and strode out without uttering another syllable. She made no move to pursue me, not immediately at least. But she would soon enough, because as I vanished from that space, it dawned on her that my humiliation had transformed into something irrevocable. I was finished with the facade. The very moment I crossed into the hallway, her device still firm in my grasp, a profound change rippled through me. It wasn't a blaze of fury or the crush of sorrow. This sensation ran colder, more detached, as if I'd breached some irreversible threshold where emotions no longer registered in their familiar forms. It wasn't apathy taking hold. Rather, my caring had sharpened into something precise, more strategic and insightful. She'd orchestrated that recording to ensnare me, to craft a dossier she could wield if the need arose, to flip the script and portray me as the erratic one, the overly suspicious partner teetering on instability. That's the real motive behind her "come" message. Not reconciliation, not a shred of remorse. She craved a spectacle, my unwitting performance in her drama. And I delivered it unwittingly. So no, I steered clear of heading straight home. I navigated instead to an upscale enclave I'd glimpsed only once prior, secured by gates, overflowing with luxury, the type of neighborhood where each driveway boasted vehicles eclipsing my yearly earnings. I knew the route because his name had stuck with me from the gathering. The man who'd elicited her laughter, the one sporting that gleaming silver watch and impeccable charisma. His full name was Terrence, her superior at work. She'd murmured it softly while fussing over imaginary specks on his sleeve, her touch lingering as if staking a subtle claim. I'd committed it to memory from the firm grip of his handshake that evening, when he'd feigned interest in my presence without truly seeing me. And conveniently, his business card remained tucked in her coat pocket, the garment I'd retrieved from the car just last week for a trip to the cleaners. Occasionally, destiny slips you the most potent tools in the most unassuming wrappers. I positioned my car a couple of residences away and approached the entrance on foot. No blueprint in mind, no scripted words rehearsed, but an urgent need propelled me to uncover what her expressions had concealed, to witness truths her face refused to reveal. I pressed the doorbell once. The exterior light flickered to life, and shortly after, the door swung open. It wasn't Terrence greeting me. It was his wife. Her hair was casually tied back, her feet bare, a wine glass cradled in one hand, her weariness evident in an authentic, unfiltered manner, not the performative fatigue Junie deployed for pity points. She blinked in mild surprise. "Can I assist you?" I should have retreated right then. But the words tumbled out. "I'm truly sorry for intruding like this. My name's Albert. I believe your husband and my wife are." Before I could complete the thought, her demeanor shifted. Not bewilderment, but instant comprehension, as if a lingering puzzle fragment had finally snapped into alignment. She skipped the demands for details or evidence. Instead, she stepped aside and invited, "Please come inside." In that heartbeat, a chilling certainty gripped me. I wasn't the inaugural visitor to arrive at her threshold bearing such revelations. The door latched shut behind me with a gentle click. For a fleeting instant, the only sound was the distant drone of a dishwasher cycling through its routine deeper within the home. Terrence's wife, Margot, as I soon discovered, dispensed with pleasantries altogether. She passed me a coaster, placed her wine aside, and headed directly to a drawer by the fireplace, her movements practiced as if this ritual were far from novel. She bypassed inquiries about my discovery of her address or my identity. With quiet efficiency, she extracted a plain manila folder and laid it on the coffee table separating us, treating it like a prime device ready to detonate. I hesitated before laying hands on it, eyeing it warily, much like one might regard a suspiciously timed mechanism attached to an enigmatic package. She settled into the seat opposite, legs crossed neatly, and remarked, "He spins his fabrications more convincingly when fatigue sets in." That's when I began sifting through his things under cover of night. So I flipped open the folder. Within lay photographs, dozens upon dozens. Some originated from surveillance feeds, pixelated in monochrome, marked with dates and times from evenings I'd assumed Junie was buried in overtime. Others appeared captured from behind a car's glass. Terrence and Junie emerging from eateries, entering structures side by side, sharing unguarded laughs. Always in close proximity, always oblivious to any watchful eyes. But the true horror didn't stem from the captured scenes alone. It was one particular image I'd never encountered. A shot of me isolated in my vehicle, head bowed toward my phone, stationed outside the party venue. I stared at it, my throat parched. "I didn't capture this." "I know," Margot responded in a hushed tone. "That was my doing." I met her gaze. No smirk crossed her lips, no triumphant gleam. She merely nodded with measured slowness and elaborated, "I noticed your car that evening at the event. You had the look of a man who'd already pieced it together. I sensed you'd circle back eventually, and here you are." Her words carried no venom, no spark of retribution, just a profound, bone-deep fatigue. "We don't need to raise our voices over this," she went on. "I abandoned that approach months back. What I'm after now is solid facts and some semblance of tranquility, but above all, I want them to drop the illusion that we're oblivious fools." I perched there, fingers clamped around the table's edge, my heartbeat thundering in this bizarre hush shared between two betrayed souls. Then she inclined forward and voiced the phrase that pierced through my emotional armor at last. "She's frequented that hotel previously, Albert. Room 1212, no less than 4 occasions in the past month alone. Identical suite, identical registration, but never listed under her own name." I refrained from probing whose it was. I already harbored the grim suspicion. I leaned back, grappling to absorb the enormity of it. When Margot pressed further, "If you're prepared to take action on this, I've already devised a strategy." And in that pivotal shift, everything I'd sought in coming here morphed into an unforeseen resurgence. A grip on control I'd thought forever lost. Margot's blueprint lacked theatrical flair. It shunned the vengeful spectacles of imagination. No outbursts, no storming hotel lobbies, no viral online spectacles. It was meticulous, subdued, and incisive, the variety forged in the quiet aftermath of rage, where only razor-sharp focus endures. Over the ensuing 2 days, we meticulously assembled the pieces: correspondence trails, reservation confirmations, communication records, and crucially, that incriminating video Junie had engineered to cast me as the erratic one. Now, I possessed her contrived evidence, her elaborate snare, and I'd inverted it entirely against her scripted tale. Margot assisted in organizing it all. She wasn't merely furious. She possessed a keen intellect that cut through the noise. Then we bided our time. We selected a Thursday for execution. Junie had already mentioned another late shift at work. I responded with indifference, planting a routine peck on her cheek that morning before departing as usual. But rather than proceeding to my job, I secured a discreet Airbnb on the city's periphery and initiated one straightforward maneuver. I left a mysterious package waiting for her to uncover, not burdened with a lengthy note or exhaustive rationales, just this sleek black box placed prominently right in the center of the dining table, her name etched neatly across the top. Tucked within was a USB drive overflowing with the irrefutable compilation, the hidden recording she'd set up, the incriminating evidence that laid everything bare, snapshots of conversations she'd convinced herself were wiped clean from existence. But the real bombshell lay deeper: a striking photograph of Margot and me seated across from one another, our wedding rings raised high like ancient tokens from a chapter we'd both decisively closed, symbols of bonds we were ready to release forever. Right next to it sat the key to our former home, the one I'd already relinquished, with every closet barren, every drawer cleared out, our shared finances meticulously divided down the middle, and the divorce paperwork officially lodged and processed. She wouldn't scratch her head over how I'd pulled it off so seamlessly. The realization would hit her like a thunderclap. For far too many years, she'd diminished my inner strength, confusing my composed silence for some kind of vulnerability or weakness she could exploit. I didn't linger around to witness her unraveling or hear her pleas. That validation held no appeal anymore, as I'd already ventured boldly into fresh horizons, leaving the wreckage behind. Margot and I stayed connected in the aftermath, but purely as partners in this mutual liberation, not entangled in any budding romance. We each charted our separate courses, finally liberated from the web of falsehoods that had ensnared us for so long, breathing freely in the open air of truth. A handful of weeks later, I claimed a simple yet welcoming retreat by the lake's edge. Nothing extravagant, but perfectly suited to this rebirth, a space that felt like a blank canvas waiting for new strokes. I snagged a gently used sofa that carried stories of its own, reignited my long-dormant love for painting with vibrant colors splashing across fresh canvases, and picked up my old guitar, its strings humming with melodies I'd set aside for what felt like an eternity. One serene evening, as the sun melted into the horizon painting the water in hues of gold and crimson, an alert chimed from a number I didn't recognize. No sender details, no explanatory words, just a lone image, a shattered mirror scattered across the floor of a familiar hotel room, with that unmistakable silver watch catching the light amid the debris. I switched off my phone, let a quiet, knowing grin spread across my face, and dove back into my music, because at long last, I was the sole architect of my destiny, crafting a life unbound by anyone else's shadows. I'd finally stepped into the role of storyteller in my own epic tale. If this chilling journey through deception, awakening, and sweet empowerment gripped you from start to finish, smash that like button to show your support, share it with a friend who's navigated their own twists of fate, and hit subscribe to Dark Infidelity Stories for more heart-pounding narratives that expose the hidden depths of broken trust and unbreakable spirits. Join our growing community today. Your next obsession awaits.